Okay, so the topic of blockchain and Web3 has several years, right? And we can think what are the killer applications for the technology, or the key application areas for the technology. And my opinion about this has been changing. And so recently I summarized this in 3 big ideas of 3 killer app areas. And I think the first one is obvious, right? Tokenization, okay? The representation of rights and value in digital form in a way that is decentralized, dependable, secure, and so on, right? So cryptocurrencies, NFTs are good examples of this. And the second one is a little more subtle, is the creation of virtual organizations, okay? So virtual organizations and the services these virtual organizations provide in a way that is, again, decentralized, dependable, secure, and so on, okay? Of course, DAOs are a good example of this. Cryptocurrencies are a good example of this. Bitcoin is a virtual organization, right, for instance, or Ethereum, or something like that. And the third one, the one that interests me today, is identity, okay? So with blockchain, with Web3, we can have digital identity in a way that is dependable, secure, decentralized, and so on, okay? So this is what I'm going to talk about today. So I'll talk about digital identity in a broad sense, okay, in the classical sense, then decentralized digital identity. Now I'll talk a bit about the EBSI, which is an European initiative in the area, and maybe some use cases if I have time. So starting with digital identity. Okay, so first, digital identity of what? Okay, so digital identity, I think the meaning is more or less clear, right? It's the representation in digital form of the identity of something, okay? And the something can be persons, organizations, devices, digital services, and many other things, okay, right? Objects, animals, and so on, okay? So I'm mostly interested today on persons and organizations, but of course the other ones are also possible. And classically, then, the focus of the digital identity was in 2 things, okay? In authentication of a person, a device, a service to show who he is online, and on authorization, okay? Once we know who the person is, or who the service is, what he is allowed to do, okay? So this is a classical, very functional way of looking at the topic, okay? What can we do? What identity allow us to do, okay? Now the focus is different on the right, so you can see that the focus is on claims or attributes. Attributes is easier to understand, claim is a technical term, okay? I want to prove that I have certain characteristics, okay? My full name, my mobile phone number, my address, the name of my mother, of my father, and so on, okay? Attributes about me. And also other concerns like privacy, user control, and so on. Okay, so this is the old, this is what is new or more recent. Okay, not exactly brand new, but classically, identity and service are more or less mixed. Okay, so that's what I have, for instance, when I access an online banking service. Okay, I have the service, and I have the bank that provides me an online access to a set of services. And the bank itself is the identity provider, okay? So I have to show before the bank that I am who I say I am. I have to introduce a username and a password, well, or a variation of this, okay? It can be, not a username, can be an email, okay? The address can be a PIN and things like that, okay? But that's the general idea, okay? So service and identity provider are mixed. Then, at some point in time, more or less recently, well, the idea has has even a few decades, okay, but to more or less recently it became widely spread. People started, the notion of single sign-on started being widely adopted, okay? So the separation between identity provider and services, at the top should be services, okay? So I can access, with Google, I can access many different applications in my mobile phone, in my laptop, and so on, and I always authenticate with Google, for instance, okay? So Google is the identity provider. Google knows who I am, and then the service just get that information from Google. And related to this, we have another option, which is federated identity, okay? So there are several identity providers, but the identity providers are connected in some way, okay? That's what we have, for instance, in Shibboleth, in the EduROM network that allows me to open my computer in my university in Lisbon, or here in Madeira, or somewhere in Europe, or even in Brazil, and so on. And I'm on, okay? That's because there is a federation of identities that accepts my identity from Técnico in all these places. That's also what happens with the electronic identity regulation from Europe, EIDAS, that allows me with my citizen card that is emitted by Portugal to authenticate in services all around Europe, okay? Every country has its identity provider or identity providers, okay? But then I can use my identity in several places. And that's the old times, right? So the new times are decentralized identity, or also called self-sovereign identity. Well, terms do not mean exactly the same, exactly to last detail the same, but that's what I'm going to talk next, okay? Okay, so there are two aspects, okay? So to show online who I am, okay, and to prove that I have certain attributes or certain claims, okay? My full name, my address, and so on. So self-sovereign identity initially was a manifesto, okay, not really a technology, okay? So it was the idea, a set of concepts, okay, related to identity, with ideas like identity belongs to the user, not to the identity provider, not to the big tech like Google, okay? My identity is mine, not from Google. Identity should be controlled by the user. There should be many identity providers, and there should be interoperability between them, okay? I could use many identity providers even if they are not federated. And that's some of the ideas that exist in this area of self-sovereign identity. There are many other interesting properties that are more or less abstract and hard to explain, so I'm going to skip that, okay? I hate long lists of properties that take a long time to explain. Then the World Wide Web Consortium, the double 3C, okay, the one that defined all the many things related to the web, defined two important concepts related to SSI, okay? So they really created the technology instead of only the manifesto, okay? So the notion of decentralized identifiers and verifiable credentials, okay? So a decentralized identifier, well, it's an identifier, okay? So this slide actually is a bit confusing, okay? But, and it's essentially, well, one of the options is to be a large random number, okay? Normally people don't believe this, but I'll explain it anyway. If you pick a large random number, this will be a unique number for you, okay? You don't believe it, right? Because if I throw a dice, I pick a random number, and if all of us from the room roll a dice, of course, many of us will have the same number, okay? Many of us will have 1, many of us will have 2, and so on, okay? But with large numbers, this happens. Think, for instance, if you pick a grain of sand that you saw last summer in the beach, and each of you picks a grain of sand that you saw last summer in the beach someday, in some beach around the world, okay, at some point in time, okay, you look at the floor and there was a grain of sand. What is the probability that two of us pick the same grain of sand? Okay, 0, okay. It's not 0, it's 0.0000000, and then there is a 1 after many, many zeros. Okay, but in practice it's 0. Okay, so in theory it's not 0. In theory there is a probability that two of us pick the same. Okay, in practice it's 0. Okay, so this can be an ID. Okay, there are other options, but this is the most obvious one. Okay, and this identifier has to be associated to a DID document. Okay, which is an electronic document, for instance, a JSON document that contains the DID itself and the public key. And with this public key, I can prove that the DID is mine, okay? How? Signing something with the private key. I have the private key, I sign something, and then I show that I have the private key that corresponds to that public key that corresponds to the deed, as long as people can trust the deed document, okay? And that's where blockchain enters, okay? But I'll talk a bit more about that later, okay? So then we have verifiable credentials. So verifiable credential is a digital document, also JSON, XML, or whatever, okay? Whose authenticity can be verified online, okay? What is a certificate? Well, it can be a certificate that I finished a certain bachelor or a certain master, or that I have a certain address or a certain set of personal data, name of father, name of mother, address, phone number, fiscal number, and so on. Or it can be the credential for a certain product, for a certain car, for a certain object, for a certain computer that has several parts, or a passport for a person, and so on. Okay? So credentials can be many different things. And so basically we have a way of digitizing credentials in a way that is verifiable. And for verifiable, it has these things, okay? So it has metadata, the deed of the user, the deed of the issuer, the emitter, the creator of the VC, claims, and the proof, which is a signature, okay? A digital signature. With digital signatures, I can verify that the verifiable credential is legitimate, okay? And so the idea is to create an ecosystem with many, many verifiable credentials for people, for companies, and so on. Okay. Then a detail, okay, but important from the privacy angle. I don't have to go around and show verifiable credentials. That's the idea, but I don't have to provide the full verifiable credentials. I can show only verifiable presentations, VPs instead of VCs, okay? So a verifiable presentation is a sort of transformation or a subset of the content of a verifiable credential. Okay? For instance, I want to show that I finish a certain bachelor at Técnico, okay? But I may not want to send the information about my final grade that is also in the VC. Okay? I may want to show that I am more than 18 years old, but not to show my birth date, because my birth date is very old and I don't want to show it, okay? So that's the idea of VPs, okay? So it's something quite related to privacy and to data minimization. Okay, so the full ecosystem, and that's where blockchain comes in, is what is shown here, okay? So at the center, we have the holder. Okay? Typically, for instance, a person that has a wallet, that is a device where the person stores these VCs and deeds and so on. And there are issuers, okay? There are entities on the left that emit these credentials, okay? For instance, there are universities that emit credentials with my bachelor, with my master, and my PhD, and so on. There are governments that emit credentials with my personal data, and so on. And then on the right, I have verifiers, okay? Entities to which I want to provide this data, okay? That I want to provide them to prove this data, to prove that I have a certain address, to prove that I have a certain phone number, to prove that I finished this master, and so on, okay? But for this to be possible, I need to provide reliable deeds, okay? Reliable deed documents, reliable associations between deeds and public keys, for instance. And for that, I need blockchain. Okay? I need blockchain to provide it in a way that is secure, that is dependable, that is available, and so on. Okay? That's what I have at the bottom. Okay? So the issuers have to store some information in something that we call a trusted data registry, which is an abstract name, but the typical implementation of a trusted data registry is a blockchain. And then the holders can check, for instance, VCs with the help of trusted data registry, and the verifiers the same thing. Okay, so we tested this in an European project called the E4A, and we implemented this in two variations. Okay, one was using ADAs, in which the verifiers would contact the issuers directly using the citizen card information to check if the information was legitimate or not. And the other one was with VCs. And the difference was huge, okay? So with the classical ADAs, there is a large interoperability problem, okay? The interoperability problem has a complexity that depends on the number of issues and the number of the verifiers, okay? We have to check one-to-one if it works. With VCs, no. We have a universal language, which is the VCs. Everyone emits VCs. Everyone consumes VCs and deeds. And if they are well-formed, then everything works, okay? The difference was huge. Okay, so what wallets store? So classical wallets store key pairs mainly, okay? These new wallets will store digital identity information, so deeds and VCs. Okay. But then a problem comes, okay? How can we trust the issuers? How can we say that the issuers are trusted, okay? How can we say that when a government issues some VCs, that the VCs indeed come from that government and not from some entity pretending to be the government? And notice that a country will generate many official VCs. Okay, so personal data, so data about bachelor, masters, and the passport number, the passport, and so on. Okay. So, and that's where the EBSI comes in. Okay, there are many solutions to that. Okay, there are many discussion. There is a lot of discussion on that. Okay, the EBSI is one of the answers. Okay, so it's an European initiative. So it's an initiative of creating a blockchain for European Union-wide cross-border public services. Public services in the beginning, maybe it will go to private services, but the idea is to have cross-border applications. So it's a blockchain, so every country will have a node. Only official nodes can join, although anyone can check if the data is there. So essentially, the EBSI is a self-sovereign identity platform. So the EBSI registers the documents for trusted accreditation authorities. For instance, the Portuguese authority that will be enabled to decide who are the trusted issuers for different things in Portugal, for passports, for the citizen card information, for university diplomas, and so on. And then holders and verifiers will only check information that is there. They will not store anything there. Okay. I'll skip this. Let me just summarize what is the status of the EBSI because I am already a bit late. Okay. So the EBSI is in pre-production. It's in pre-production for some time now. The initiative started in 2018 and a few years passed since then. Initially, it was an initiative of several ministers from the European Union, and they created an informal group called the European Blockchain Partnership. Okay, a very interesting experience because it was really a decentralized organization. Okay, but then at some point there was the need for a legal entity appeared, and so a sort of association, multi-stakeholder association called the European EDIC appeared. Okay. Interestingly, it's looking for a director. If you are a senior person in the area, you know about technology, maybe you want to apply to be a director of the European EDIC. Okay? So, but there is a large community already. Okay, there is an ecosystem of hundreds of companies. There is a large infrastructure with 41 nodes and so on. Everything is working, but in pre-production. Okay. In parallel, another initiative appeared in Europe, which is EIDAS 2. Okay, so EIDAS was a regulation from 2014. In 2024, it was revised, and it defined a framework for the European digital identity wallets. Mainly, it defined that European citizens will be entitled to have a wallet to store decentralized identifiers or VCs, mainly. Okay, I will skip these use cases because we don't have time for this. I will finish with the key takeaways because I'm already very late. Okay, and so the key takeaways, I think, are these ones. Okay, so digital identity or self-sovereign identity is a first order. It's an important application for blockchain. Okay, it's something that we definitely want to use. There are others, of course. This is not the one, but it's one of those. Okay. These concepts from the World Wide Web Consortium, DIDs and VCs play a key role. Okay? There are other standards. Actually, there are many standards, as always, right? Standards are something that is good because there are many to choose from. The EBSI will be an important part of the ecosystem, especially for Europe, but it's still in pre-production. And there are many use cases, for instance, in real estate and others. Okay, and that's it from my side. Thank you very much.